If you want to hear my final thoughts on the Urban Decay Elements palette, then stick around. Hi there, it's Hélène with another video, and I'm hoping this one will be a short one because it is the equivalent of a brand new focus, how was it, but it's only for one palette. So it is basically me giving you my final thoughts on this palette, the Urban Decay Elements. This is what it looks like. Technically, that's how it should be as far as the palette layout. And it comes in this plastic packaging. Now, this was a limited edition palette. It is pretty much not available anymore. So why am I talking about it? Well, because I think that even though it is not available anymore, I can still have opinions on a palette that I was very late to the game in trying. This palette came out in October. We are now at the end of March 2019, so it came out in October 2018. And I have to sheepishly admit that when I got this palette, it went 50% off, and it was my consolation prize for not getting the Born to Run, because the Born to Run never went on significant discount before my no-buy, and I am in my no-buy year right now. So there's just no way that I'm going to be buying any Urban Decay during this year. But it was very nice to try an Urban Decay palette during my no-buy year, and of course we're in month 3 because I started January 1st, and I have had a chance to do 5 looks with this palette. And I'd like to just talk about the component to begin with. I don't like round palettes. I have talked about this a number of times now in videos. I won't explain more why. And so this palette I keep in the box just because the box is square, this is round, and so it has actually been right on my back shelf here without the box for the duration of this look-see in this of this palette. And now that I've used all 19 shadows that come in the palette, I am satisfied that I'm not going to reach for it every day. I know what the palette is capable of, and it's going to go into its box until I either use it again or until the day that I decide to depot these. Now, I thought these were, the outside ring was regular size pans, and it is not the case. The only regular size pan is this one, which is Luna in the middle. And that was a real disappointment to me when I did open up the palette, because I ordered it online. I never saw it in person before ordering. And the size of the pans is very small, and I think that it would be a little bit annoying to have such small pans depotted, because visually I find that chaotic, but also to transfer into magnetic quads, I'm worried about these little pans going all over the place, and I feel like it might be a real mess. But if I get really frustrated with this palette, I may very well try my hand at depotting it. And I do wonder if I can get the lid off, because it looks like there's a pin in the middle, and that maybe I can pop this part of the plastic pan off to get better access to the shadows. But there's always a big risk when you depot from plastic that it's going to all go to crap. So for now, I'm going to keep the palette intact. So that is the packaging as far as the aesthetics of it, but I do have to talk about how you can hold this packaging. And I wonder if this was part of why they made it round. It is very easy, you can see, very easy to hold, and every one of the looks that I did here on my channel, this is how I was holding the palette, and it was a really good experience. And the mirror is really great as far as the size. You can see your whole face in it, and you're not holding the mirror in front of anybody. It's big enough that you can just tilt it and you can really see your whole face as you're putting the makeup on. So that is a very significant redeeming quality of this palette. Now let's talk about the shadows a little bit. I was very impressed with all of the shadows on the inside ring. One of them that was very, very strange to me was Hex Remedy. And Hex Remedy can be a very temperamental shadow, but I did find that if I pat and do not rub or brush, This shadow does very, very well on the eye. Indeed, it was part of my last look with this palette. I enjoyed both of these. I don't think that that's a big mystery because sparkly browns usually work quite nicely. Fool's Gold is very, very pretty, and I'll just put the swatch video right here if you want to reference all of these, because I won't swatch them again. And this one that I used in my final look, Silver Burn, was a very nice surprise. It does act like a transformer shade over other shadows, or at least it did over Secret Keeper and Hex Remedy. I used it in the center and then sprinkled it a little bit over these two shadows, and it looked really, really good. A shadow that is temperamental is definitely this one, which is Sapphire Dream. The finger and a very, very thin, very dense liner brush those are the only two ways that I found to properly use that shadow, although it is a very, very deep pigmented Sapphire Dream. It brushes away and it's very patchy, at least in my opinion, when using a brush. Heavy Water created a very vibrant, beautiful look by using it on the inner lid. I really appreciated that. Ego was beautiful on the crease as well as on the inner lid. I really enjoyed that color. I was not a big fan of Dreamweaver, although it did apply really well with a fluffy brush. Trying to use a finger for any part of Dreamweaver did make it quite patchy. Firestarter, even though it has some shimmer, behaves beautifully as a matte, and I would say that out of what I would consider mattes in this palette, this is my favorite. Lioness was is an absolutely beautiful burgundy purple. Volcanic is a no-brainer. Elemental was a no-brainer. This one, Earthbound, I believe it was my third look, and it is a beautiful green. It went really well as well with Fool's Gold. And what am I missing? Fortune Teller was a predictable, nice color. It is the typical duochrome that we find in so many palettes, so I knew that that one was going to look good. Electric Air worked very well as an inner corner highlight. And then Luna, which is supposed to be a transformer shade, I was lukewarm about Luna. I was not super impressed with it. It has a pink shift to it, and I actually found it distracting and annoying as opposed to helpful and transformative for other shades. And if anything, it was a big disappointment to me because it's the biggest pan in the palette and probably one of the shadows that I would use the least. And obviously from Urban Decay's point of view, Luna was supposed to be a high use pan, which is why it is so big. I would give this palette, I don't usually rate them like this, but I would give it a strong B. I don't think that it knocked my socks off. I think that there are other Urban Decay palettes that I like more than this one. I didn't think there was a ton of product. I did appreciate the fact that 19 shadows, there was a lot of choice, so maybe that was the trade-off. Smaller pans for more choice. And given that it's hard to go through a lot of colorful shadows for most of us, that maybe smaller pans are the wave of the future. But yeah, I mean, just using the pans a few times, I have some significant dips in them, so I don't think that this palette would last all that long. The moment you would have a favorite, you would dig into it pretty quickly, in my opinion. I mean, I used it 5 times, and the wear on the shadows is very apparent. And I think that's all I have to say on the Urban Decay Elements palette. I think that the artwork on the palette is absolutely beautiful. It is inspiring. I think that the outside packaging does reflect what it is that you get inside. I do love how I can handle the palette. I think that there's quite a variety of shadows in the palette. Not a big fan of the pan size. Not a big fan of a number of the finish on the consistency and finish on some of the shadows. But did I come up with 5 solid looks? I did, but I would definitely not put this one in a top 5 for what I have from Urban Decay. It wouldn't even come close. I would trade this in for the full spectrum palette, which is something that I have. I would also trade it for the 9-pan Jean-Michel Basquiat colorful palette that was also limited edition. I would trade this one in for the electric palette because I think all of those shadows are so unique and you couldn't find them anywhere else. I know there are a few unique ones in here, but it's not the norm. Put it this way, I'm really happy that I got it half price. I think that if I had paid full price for this palette, I would be pretty unhappy with my lack of judgment in having added this palette to my collection. Is it going to stay in my collection? Yes, I am okay with the price for value, that the price value point at which it came into my collection. It is going to go back into its box. But I thought this one might be a quick declutter, and it turns out it won't be. I think a solid B is not a bad rating. I think it's a rating that warrants me keeping it in my collection. But that's it. That's as far as I'll go with this palette. And yeah, again, 5 good, solid looks. I could do good, solid looks similar to that with other stuff in my collection for the most part. And a lot of different palettes would easily displace this one. It would not be a palette that I would say is top drawer for me. But is it interesting? Yeah, I'll give it that much. I hope you found this review or roast entertaining. I do look forward to your comments below. Do you have the Elements palette? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Why? Were you considering getting the Elements palette? Did you pass on it? If so, why? I would love to hear your story when it comes to this palette. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. But for now, take care.